Hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to another video. Today we are going to do another review of the Arteza products. I'm going to take a look at their watercolors, their colored pencils, and their watercolor paper. And I thought it would be really interesting to kind of switch it around and try to recreate my normal regular illustrations with their products, just to see how, how my illustration would look with their products. Now, spoiler alert, this is not going to be that video. Reviewing 3 products at the same time is really time consuming. And once I realized how much footage I realized, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna make 2 parts out of this review, just because it's way too much to take in one time. Also, I really like to be thorough when I'm reviewing something. So this video is more like a first impression rather than a general review. And then in the next one, in the next video, I'm going to share really an in-depth how I worked with it, how just an in-depth look at how it's to, paint with these. So we are starting with unboxing and swatching the watercolors. And this is a 24 tube watercolor set. It's their premium set. So there are 24 colors, and that's including white and something they call noir, which is not exactly black. It's the same with gouache. I would say it's like a one shade less than black. It's a very, very dark gray, and you will see me when I swatch it. So I've prepared this little palette here, and I've decided to just squeeze the colors into that palette just to have it a little bit more easier. I knew I wanted to paint a little bit more with it and just swatch it and just, doodle. I really wanted to review it, and I really wanted to paint a little bit more with it. So I figured that having a little palette for it would probably be very handy. So I have a few of those really cheap palettes for these purposes. And so I'm squeezing, basically, while I'm squeezing these colors in, let me tell you a little bit, because what I wanted to touch upon is the fact that this set has a white watercolor in it. Now, I know a lot of people do not like that because white watercolor is considered to be, just useless. You use the white of the paper. While I agree with that, I also feel like I always love to have a white watercolor, whether to be in tubes or in just a set. Maybe not exactly a set, because once the white watercolor dries, it's a little bit less useful. But if the white watercolor is dense enough and pigmented enough, you can actually use it as gouache. And that's how I used to use it before I figured out what gouache was. I've used white watercolor. And so right now I'm changing to my little chart, the swatch chart. And as you can see, the first swatch is the white, where I'm trying to figure out if it's actually going to be useful as a substitute gouache. And yeah, it definitely is. This is a quite pigmented white watercolor. It's not gouache. It's definitely not gouache. It's white watercolor. It's not as pigmented as gouache would be, but I've seen much more milkier white watercolors, so this one will do really nicely. And I really do know that people don't like white watercolor, but you know what, I've painted so often mixing this white watercolor, creating beautiful pastels with other watercolors, and that's one of the first tips I've learned, like tips, little cheats. It was this cheaty gouache, where if you added white watercolor to any of your other colors of watercolor, just want to make sure that's it created kind of like a half translucent, half opaque gouache, really chalky texture. It was something different. I loved painting with that. So I'm always looking forward to actually having good quality white watercolor in my set. So here I'm actually just going through the swatches. A lot of these colors are half transparent. There, I believe, only one that's fully transparent. That's the ultramarine. A lot of them are rather chalky, I would say. This set really reminds me of the Van Gogh set that I've been using for the longest time here on this channel, before I switched just recently to different watercolors. And it really reminds me, they're very, very vibrant colors, very vibrant, but a little bit chalky when they dry, and a lot of them are, like I've said, you know, almost like only one is transparent. A lot of them are granulating. You will see this later on. I made sure to include a lot of close-ups so you can see exactly what this watercolor looks like. This is not really a pro or con. This is really just whatever you are looking forward to when you're using watercolor. I've used these kind of watercolors for the longest time, and I've never really had problems with that. The only thing that really surprised me here is the phthalo blue, because I don't know if my phthalo blue, the one that I'm used to, phthalo blue is supposed to be like a transparent color, right? At least that's what I'm used to. That's the only real thing that surprised me in this set. The rest is just, you know, for me, I'm just looking at the watercolors and kind of trying to figure out what's the best way to use them. I'm not expecting anything when I see a watercolor set, especially when it comes from a brand like Arteza, which is supposed to be brand that's concentrating on creating very affordable art supplies. So here you can see a bit of a close-up at the colors. You can see how they have covered that black line, but also you can see how vibrant they are. They're really beautiful. I am very pleased how my camera picked up the colors. They're very, very vibrant, but yeah, they are definitely not transparent, so you have to bear that in mind when you are going, if you decide to buy them. Now, the next thing is this Arteza paper, and I'm actually going to stay away from the paper for now. We are going to swatch the colored pencils first, because one thing for me, paper is paper, okay? A lot about the paper comes up for me once I use it. So one thing I can tell you, this block is huge, and it's 300 gram or 140 pounds. So this is, for me, at first glance, was a very good quality paper. You know, just the kind of paper I would pick up as when I paint with watercolors. The colored pencils are absolutely insane. There are 72 pencils in that set. They're all unique colors. As you can see here, I'm kind of showing you the close-up. They have a number, they have light fastness, I believe, and then a name on each color. So this is really nice. If you remember, in the fine liners review, I was complaining that there were no names on the fine liners. And so in this case, on the colored pencils, which are the expert quality, you get the name, so you can you're able to differentiate them a little bit better. So here I'm swatching them, and I was really impressed with these colored pencils. The color, how would you call it, the payout, the color intensity is really nice. The pencils are really nice and creamy. I'm sorry that the camera is kind of going out of focus. Sometimes it's the white paper. So as you can see here, eventually I started going a little bit lighter to show you that these colors were just kind of the range of colors that you get, range of shades. But the colored pencils are really creamy. I don't really draw, or rather, let's call it paint, with colored pencils. For me, they are more of a mixed media, added texture, added detail kind of a thing. So I'm not going to be able to tell you a lot about how they perform on their own. But I have a few brands of colored pencils, and I have to say that for me, these colored pencils really come close to Prismacolors when it comes to the way they just feel and behave, and the color, that they put on paper. Is it payoff? I can't remember the word. But it's just a really, really nice, creamy texture and a lot of color coming out of it. So at first I was a little bit intimidated by it because my favorite colored pencils are actually their Vent Studio, and they are not as creamy. They are very fine, And these Arteza ones, they are more on the thicker side, I would say. What it means is that you can, when you color with them, you can really clearly see the texture of the paper, which just for me means that I will have to be careful if I want to, just so that I don't really make a lot of mess on the paper. This is not bad quality at all. This just means that these colored pencils are kind of like an art medium on their own and not just a companion. So yeah, basically you have to be careful. I've had a lot of fun just swatching them. The colors are beautiful. One thing I can tell you, they do not match. I think I don't remember actually seeing any of the colors match the exterior color. I'm trying to kind of show you here. They're really close. Usually the outside of the pencil is darker than the actual color of the pencil. I presume that if I really pressed hard and layered that color, I would eventually get to that intensity. But it's not annoying, it's just one of those things, you know. Very rarely I see any kind of art product that would have the same, Arteza art product that would have the exact same color on the outside and or on the inside. The colors themselves are really nice. I usually look, I would say that the name of the color matches more the inside of the color, inside of the color pencil. Especially lavender here was, for me, just perfect lavender. So I was really surprised. So as I've mentioned before, I wanted to paint the kind of like, you know, quote unquote Anita painting, which is a really detailed illustration, kind of fantasy based. But the problem here was that after swatching everything and seeing the paper, I started feeling really intimidated by it, and I've decided to take it a little bit slower and go with something really, you know, simple, and just to test the paper. The paper was what, you know, you can't really see it here, but the paper was something that really made me question myself and my technique. That's because the paper itself has a very interesting texture. I've never seen texture like this on paper before. It's definitely a mechanical texture, probably, of course, from the machine, right? So it's a machine-made paper. But it looks almost like as if it had little horizontal or, you know, just stripes going one way. And that texture, really, you can really see it when you put down the paint. You can't see it really that well when you have, like, you know, when there's just a blank paper. Once you put that color down and look closely, you can really see that texture. And it's really weird because that texture, while it's not overwhelming, to me it's not neutral enough. I personally am not a big fan of this paper. Not the quality of the paper, just those, especially those stripes. The texture, the mechanical texture for me is just adds too much. It's not neutral enough to stay in the background. Especially that the paint itself seems to be kind of seep. You can already see it, how it seeps into those little ridges in the paper. So for me, for example, I was really thinking that, you know, this paper would be perfect for on, you know, when you think about wet on wet, because that's what we're doing right now. We're painting a galaxy purely wet on wet. I just wanted to see how much water this paper would be able to take if the paint would mix wet on wet. That's a bit of a mixed opinion here, because it kind of mixes, kind of doesn't. I feel like the paint doesn't move much on the paper. Definitely doesn't mix, but yeah, it's just, you know, I'm really showing you lots of close-ups here. Here you can see how much the paper warped. Definitely much more than other 300 grams paper that I'm used to. Even though, you know, the amount of water I put down wasn't that much compared to, you know, what I normally would for a wet on wet technique. And here I'm also showing you how it looks like when it dries. So I'm drawing this whole portion here for you guys. It's usually I cut this out just because it takes so long, but I really wanted to show you how much the colors dry back. They really, really dry back. And here you can see really well that texture of the paper and how the pigments, because the pigment is very heavy in this. These are all very heavy watercolors. They're not exactly granulating, just as I said, a little bit chalky, so that pigment kind of just pulls into those little ridges. I don't know, it's just a little bit too uniform. So initially I wanted to do only one layer of watercolor, but unfortunately the watercolor wasn't kind of moving enough for me. I couldn't really add that much color, so I've decided, okay, I'm gonna do another layer, and this time it's not exactly wet, it's wet and dry. I'm just adding water as I go to kind of blend it all together. I was trying to be very gentle because these colors really pick up nicely. They really lift. You could see that in the swatches, and I had a feeling that I shouldn't disturb this paper too much. This is a lower quality watercolor paper. I believe, this is of course machine made. It doesn't really matter to me that much. However, it kind of, the way it felt, the way the paint layered over it, it made me feel that I have to be very careful with it and gentle. Here's something that I've noticed, it's not exactly a problem. I've accidentally noticed that my whole hand was covered in just dust. And I've realized that without really rubbing too much, I'm picking up the pigment from the dried watercolor. Once again, for me, it's not a problem. It's just another reason for me to seal the painting afterwards. That's just the thing. So here I'm going in with some of the colored pencils. Now I'm not using all of them, as I've mentioned. I use colored pencils mostly as just an accent color. And I've used that, here it's especially important. I've used colored pencils in the past a lot with my old watercolor set because it would do exactly the same thing that this one does. It dries back dull, a little bit duller than I would like it to. And it's also a little bit chalky, which makes a perfect background for adding some colored pencil. So I really took my time here, and I've been adding those colored pencils, just trying to feel them, how they work. And I have to say, I am so impressed with the colored pencils. They layer beautifully. Even that yellow just layered really nicely. The blue on the black came out beautifully. Not every blue would be this, not every blue pencil that I've tried, it was this pigmented to actually make that much of a difference in color. So, of course, we have our galaxy. Next thing would be to add the stars. So here I'm testing that white watercolor. And I realized that here probably using a toothbrush would be much better. Yeah, I was a little bit in a rush, so this is just a test. It came out really nicely. As I said, it's not gouache. It wasn't perfectly opaque, but it did the job. It got the job done, is what I wanted to say. It got the job done. It worked really nicely, and I could really add the detail with the watercolor. Now here, of course, I'm using watercolor straight from the tube. It's not the one that I've added to the palette earlier. That one dried already a bit. It's straight from the tube. That's definitely the better way to use gouache or watercolor or just opaque watercolor, let's put it this way. So I'm adding just a little bit of detail, and then I'm coming in with another thing I like to use, and it's kind of like a hit or miss for me. The white colored pencil. I really like adding it for just a slightly little bit of glow around the stars, and this one just really behaves as Prismacolors do. It adds that very, very rough texture around it, very distinct. It doesn't really blend in, but it adds nice texture. So here I'm adding a little bit of a close-up, and you can see that texture really well. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this like kind of first impression video, I suppose. You guys can really see closely how this looks like, and I'm glad that I didn't really do my regular illustration, because I would probably struggle a lot. And now I'm a little bit more prepared, so you will see next time what's gonna happen. One thing, my really heavy-duty masking tape with a little bit of heat, I do not trust any paper to just use for the masking tape not to rip any paper without using heat gun. So that came out really nicely. So if you guys would like to see more of these kind of videos, please give it a thumbs up, and in the description box below you will have a coupon code for Arteza, which is still valid till the end of March, and you can go to their website and use it there. Or if you are European from, Europe or the other parts of the world that are not the United States, you can buy the same products on Amazon. There are also links in the description. However, the coupon code will not work there. So I'm sorry. So I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so very much for watching. Bye!